No, no buzz. Just Bees Book Club. It's the end of the year. Uh, this is wild. Yeah, this is going to be the last video of 2023. A year in which I decided that I was going to turn this into a regular thing. Started in late 2021, early throughout 2022. Just kind of recorded stuff whenever I recorded it and put it up in weird batches. And then at some point early this year, I decided to intentionally have this come out every Friday. I think starting near the end of January, and it has wild. I'm a person who's made a lot of things in my time, and I've never been particularly good at consistency. This is why I burnt out of freelance writing, on top of other things. But hey, maybe by this point there will have been a piece out for a couple of months at this point, but a few months even. I am very excited that this weird project that I decided on a couple of years ago, that I think I'll have talked about in the 2-year anniversary episode, so I won't redo that, but I haven't done that yet. I haven't written the thing that hopefully is going out on October 4th. That might also be on this channel. I hope it is. It's mid-September, by the way. Hi, B. I'm very excited to be able to end this very experimental, strange year of this very experimental, strange thing that I do with Jewel Box by E. I'm very clearly holding an advanced reader copy. Again, it's mid-September. This book doesn't come out until October 23rd, October 24th. Not for sale, it says right there. And I'm going to be quoting from this fairly extensively, which I think it says on every advanced reader copy is like, do not quote, check final book for, etc., etc. I didn't. I do these one take. This is not a review. This is not for anyone who's not a bee. But yeah, much like Yukimi Ogawa, I discovered Ililiu's writing, specifically her short stories, about a decade ago. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. The stories in Jewel Box are, I think the earliest one is from 2011, and they range up to 2021, so it's about a decade's worth of her writing. There's like, I counted this earlier, hold on. 23 stories in here, something like that. Over 20 stories, definitely, in Jewel Box. Some of them I like more than others, but none of them I like not at all. So yeah, I fell in love with Ililiu's short stories a decade ago. Have passionately read them in the years since, and I'm so glad to have this collection. Her writing is inimitable. It is gorgeous. She works, I would say, there is the similarity with Ogawa's writing, who's like Smoke Like Light I talked about in October, I guess, which is still not, I'm still before that. Maybe that's late September. I don't remember what I scheduled things for. I just know that I've scheduled things. Both sort of play in in the space of fable and myth, in very different ways. Both have a really remarkable and particular voice in their writing, in very different ways. And both are just like people I'm very glad, writers I'm very glad, I don't know either of them as people. Writers I'm very glad to have books out in the world because their stories have meant a lot to me over the last 10 years plus. And it's nice to see that, hopefully, get out there and in such a way that other people can read it. Like I said, I kind of pulled. This is a new. This is this journal's debut on No No Buzz. It's also its debut to me since. I remember something here. Most of the beginning of this journal is me writing about talks I was at an Indiecade, which had to have been 7 years ago. A lot of just notes about Indiecade, and still Indiecade, still Indiecade. I drew a little thing in here. It's not a thing I usually do. Interesting. Oh, this is now I'm on QGCon notes, the Queerness in Games conference. Oh wow, my notes for the Mark Danielewski, the Familiar Volume 2, are in here. Something I published in Strange Horizons a million years ago. Anyway, I took down a quote from each of the stories in Jewel Box by E. Liliu, a book that I think is phenomenal, a collection that I think is phenomenal. And maybe I've written about that in the past, the future of when I'm recording this, in the past of when this is coming out, because it's the end of the year. Hey, happy end of 2023. I think anything I record from this point forward is going to go on the Wednesday prior. So it'll be like, this is what, the December 29th. So Thursday would be 28th. So this would be like, if I do another video, it will be the 27th of December, and then the 20th of December, and then the 13th of December, and then, subtraction. But that will have already happened, or not. So I don't know why I'm saying this. I do these all. I mean, I was going to say I do these all in one take. Technically, that's not true. I think once or twice I have scrapped a video, but I fundamentally do these all in one take, and I don't edit shit. Should we get into it? We should probably get into it, huh? The first story of Jewel Box, as it is collected in this advanced reader copy, these all could change, is called The Pilgrim and the Angel, about a man named Farid who is minding his shop when the angel Gabriel shows up and takes him on a Hajj, but really he just wants to go see his son in Miami, and so the angel takes him to his son. And the line I pulled from here, these are all going to be about a sentence, maybe two, I guess potentially three, I think is maybe one of them, but I'm pulling these sentences more to talk about, or to hopefully illustrate, how good at sentences E. Liliu is, and maybe I'll explicate more, or maybe not, depending on what I do from now on. So The Pilgrim and the Angel, the sentence I pulled was, to Farid's surprise, Ahmed, who had never cooked or lifted a finger at home, made fool with eggs and lemon sauce lamb on rice. I'm a fan of writing about food, as I'm a fan of making food now, have been for a number of years. I think this is a great little bit of characterization. This is all sort of told in a close third from Farid's perspective, or we are like very close to Farid's perspective. Ahmed is his son, who has been in Miami for a while, has sort of stopped calling. Farid gets a magic carpet ride, very literally, and ends up in Miami. Ahmed is confused, sort of has to admit that he has a girlfriend, that their worlds have sort of split apart, and it is perhaps, I was going to say trite. I don't think it's trite. It is perhaps studied. It is perhaps used often, the function of food in literature as a sort of as a sort of mortar by which to meld people together. But I think this is just like a really good example of the importance of food, the way that food can be used, and and specifically illustrate strained relationships in different lights. The way this is followed up is something along the lines of like Farid cleans the complete bowl and then says it is very good, which is a very powerful admission, I think, in many. I don't know. As a cook, as a baker, sometimes more in the past than recently. Um, to have someone finish the food that you made them and say something very simple can be very, very effective. And that's, yeah. The next story is The Lamp at the Turning, which is a story about a street light on the corner of Booley and something. I don't remember the exact titles. Those, not titles, street names. And it is like the other street lamps, a street light. Turns on at a certain time, turns off at a certain time. It chatters with the pigeons and gulls that roost on it sometimes, but otherwise it just does its job until one day it sees a boy and falls in love. And the street lamp starts refusing to turn on until the boy shows up. The boy at some point notices this and touches the street lamp and says something like, "You always wait for me." And the street lamp absolutely is bowled over. One day the street lamp sees the boy with a girl. It has a little meltdown. One day the girl comes back and tells the street lamp that the boy has left for a different city, for a different job. And then there's a street crew that comes in to fix the street lamp. Really solid magical realism. Fun story. Honestly, only a handful of pages. But the quote I pulled from it, which I think is, I thought I was going to have more of these, frankly, when I was drafting these out. But Yu has a phenomenal toolkit for describing nature, and especially the changing of seasons. And this is like an example I find very affecting. In the park across the street, the elms and oaks were browning at their tips. Magpies conferred and conspired in the grass. Yeah. Browning at their tips it's just an evocative image to me. You know, conferred and conspired is just a nice way to describe what magpies do. I don't know. Lovely little story. Then we get to one that, in my mind, is probably the most famous of her work, of these short stories specifically, which is called The Cartographer Wasps and the Anarchist Bees. This is a story about Yue, is it set in Yue? Anyway, the Yue script is involved heavily. Young boy finds a smooth stone and goes, "Damn, I could hit a sparrow with this real good." There's no sparrows around, but there's all these like weird paper globes everywhere in my little town. Throws it, it's wasps, gets stung. The mother scalds the nest to kill the wasps and discovers that when a wasp nest in this area is dipped into hot water, it unfurls into a perfect map of the area. This leads to people destroying all the wasps in that area, and then one wasp group builds a little boat and floats down the river for a bit, and then ends up in a place where there is a beehive nearby that they colonize effectively. Some of the bees become anarchists and set out to have the bees themselves are, of course, a constitutional monarchy because queen bees, obviously, but some of them become anarchists over the course of this subjugation and go to try to start a new way of living And the story ends in a really sort of beautiful but maybe slightly idealistic way of the anarchist bees die during the winter because they were trying to start a new colony just before winter started functionally. But they have written down their ideals and their understanding of how society can work. And the last line of the story is "Right," she said, I believe. It's not what I wrote down. It's lovely. It's fun. And this quote that I wrote down is an example, I think, of use the sort of goofiness that occasionally comes through, because these are all like I said, this works most often in sort of the realm of fable or myth. There is a sense of there's a lot of elliptical writing in Yu's work. There is things that are evoked and not explained often. There is a sense of a moral to be imparted, even though it's often, I would say, ambiguous in a way that I really like. One of the things I think about when I think about Liu's writing is how the whole subgenre of like the twisted fable of fantasy, and I would throw in with that the feminist retelling is so impoverished when it comes to language most of the time. I think you and to a certain extent Ogawa, not to continue harping on them, but I just do love both of them so much as writers. Yu has a way of approaching the twisted fairy tale as a piece of art rather than a piece of shit. What's the word? It's not rhetoric or a satire, but as a polemic, I guess is the thing I'm looking for. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for goof. But here is a goof to me. Anarchism being a heritable trait in bees, a number of the daughters of the new queen found themselves questioning the purpose of the monarchy. Anarchism being a heritable trait is a funny thing to me. I think it's funny. I think she did a good job of making a good joke. Okay. The next story is, from what I could tell, and it's, again, this is an advanced reader copy, so it might be that there's things missing. But I went through the little copyright page right here. So all this is where stories appeared in the past, and I think this is the first one that did not appear anywhere else. I think this is the first original story to the collection. I could be wrong about that, but I double checked it. The story is called "The Lion God and the Two Gates." This is a good one. This is much more in the fable register than the things that we have discussed so far. This is about a judge who refers to himself as the incorruptible judge, has it wrought into his gates and everything. And we get some examples of the kinds of judgments he does, and it's very clearly he's a coward and fraud. The first judgment he passes, right, is like a woman accuses a man of raping her, and the man says, like, I didn't do it. And the judge's response is, were there any witnesses? And the only witness that comes forth is somebody who says, like, I heard something around the time they said that, but it was like a cry and a splash, and it could have been a heron or whatever. And he's like, well, the point of judgment is to be impartial, and therefore I was there, no one was there, so couldn't tell. And Italy was extremely clear on this point. The soldiers who are chatting afterwards are just like, wow, what a great judge. Like, or one of them is like, wow, what a great judge. You know, it's so wild how this is the third time a crazy woman came up and accused that guy of uh, of of raping her, and it's so cool that the judge just doesn't like worry about women's feelings. He just has the impartiality of justice in mind. Anyway, aren't there so many crazy women out there? This is very clear where this judge stands in the from the narrative frame, right? And the judge dies, goes to uh, his final judgment, and a very fun thing happens that includes the lion god mentioned in the title, who the judge is like, oh, I've done my obeisance to all the gods that I was supposed to, and the lion god says, you know this very well. The point of a judge is not to be known. I don't have an altar. That would be bribing. Anyway, choose whether you go through this gate or this gate, because one of them is heaven and one of them is hell, which is great. The quote I have from this is actually from the Lion God. So this is our first piece of dialogue that I'm going to be reading. This is the Lion God speaking to the judge after the judge says, like, wouldn't everyone just choose? Because there's the way the gates are described is like one is overflowing with the scents of cinnamon, frankincense, and myrrh. The other one smells of sulfur, etc. And the judge asks, like, wouldn't everyone just choose to go effectively to heaven? Like, and the lion god's response is, those who chose evil over good while alive, despite being able to discern between them, find themselves choosing the same in death, the lion god said. As a cart's wheel digs a rut in the road, as a cart's wheels dig a rut in the road, so habit carves its path in the soul. I don't know. That's a truth claim that I believe. I think it's a really wonderful dig at this judge who believes impartiality means ignoring the harm that has been done to others. That means ignoring the reality of the lived world of people. And he gets his, and it's pretty good. Music for the Underworld is the next story. Okay, what are we at? We're at story 5 out of 20-ish. That's cool. I like this book a lot. Music for the Underworld is a story about Feo, who is an underground musician. I forget exactly what she writes in terms of his genre. It's very kind of goofy. It's like a near future story. And actually, the quote is a kind of the setup, so I'll do this. Feo has a theremin that he loves. His only possession he truly treasures. And he lives in this apartment complex, and at one point he's playing it, and this person named Yuri comes over, and she hangs out with him, and they start a love affair. And then this happens. Yuri had frozen, then excused herself, then gone straight to HR. There she spoke the unspeakable words, prohibited by law and punishable with life in prison. Racism, sexism, sexual harassment. Which is a lovely enunciation of HR, which I always love to see that. Fuck HR. They're there for the company and not for you. Yuri's being harassed by a boss and talks to HR. And in this very, very simple moment, glib even, you might say, the world is extremely established as, you're in the story about an underground DJ who's like, in the monthlies, but also mostly talked about on the dark web. And you just get this little detail of like, oh, this is a world in which they have literally not just life sentences still, but life sentences based on the use of terms that describe objective conditions, and you know where that comes from. Yuri then ends up going to jail. Feo desperately wants to reach her to help her break out, but even just to see her, ends up pulling some strings to organize a concert at the dark site, basically, that she's at, but not before getting a phone app that basically gives him an AI version of her, and yeah, and then things proceed from there. This is I think this is one of the more complicated stories, I think, in my brain, because I like it, but I also forget about it, right? Like, the cartographer wasp and the anarchist bees is just always there. Pilgrim and the Angel is good. The lamp at the turning is like a slight story, but the kind of thing that sticks with you. Lion God and the Two Gates also, just like, as soon as I read that title, I'm like, yes, I know exactly what that story was. Music for the Underworld is one of those ones I have to be like, yes, I take two beats, right? And I think it's really well done, but it's the first one of these, I think, that I was like, nice, instead of like, ooh, ooh. uh, Up next, we have Green Glass, a love story. God, this is Ililiu's climate fiction at its funniest. It is uh, it is a it is a is a Regency romance for the 2040s. I don't know if that makes sense. It is like this wealthy girl and this wealthy guy like have known each other since grade school, but they fall apart and like they fall away from each other during their college years, and then they get back together and they fall in love and are courting, right? It is the kind of thing that is just peppered with little moments, right, of like like, oh, the people who are catering this reception having a little conversation, not a reception, it's an art show where the two first meet up again, and the two people catering, they're like sneaking off to like be like, oh, should we fuck, and you just overhear two people being like, fuck, a poison tide rolled in, how do we even get home? And one's like, well, do you want to take like a private security drone? And they're like, that's half of my fucking paycheck. And the other one's like, you can swim, and like, are you gonna swim in the poison tide? And the other one's like, I'm not gonna swim anywhere. I know about a broom closet in this building that's on a floor I'm not gonna tell you about because I'm sleeping here tonight. So just like incidental dialogue or mentions of things that indicate, there's also a moment where it's like, the tide had risen to lap at the sills of the cabs driving down the street, and they have like a cute little moment where they're talking together and thinking like, oh, are all the poors going to move to paddle boats soon? Are we going to have a sort of Venetian New York? And it's just great, and the people suck, but also like are not written in a way where it's clear that they think they suck. They're just living their life. They're just doing the work. They just happen to be born into families that allow them to be really lucky art speculators. And so here's my quote from this. Before long, they were dancing the usual dance. Flights to Ibiza, Lima, Sao Paulo, volunteer trips to the famine-racked heartlands of wherever, lunches at Baccarat and dinners at Queen Alice, afternoons at the rum-smelling dusty clubs that survived behind stone emblems and leaded windows. That's like the beginning of their love affair, right? And yeah, it's a love story. It's like it says in the subtitle, or it's funny. It's again funny, and infuriating in a very good way, I think. Next story is one of our more fable-oriented ones. We've got Ilsa, who saw clearly. This is a story about a young girl in love. She lives in a mountain town where a. I wonder if I can find this super quickly. Uh, where a traveling vendor comes through with a certain thing to sell, and this vendor is sort of. And what he's saying was thus: ice for sale, eyes for sale. If your complexion be dark or pale, if your old eyes be sharp or frail, come buy, bright ice for sale. Only his listeners could not tell whether he was selling ice or eyes, because he spoke in an odd accent and through a thick scarf. So, this vendor comes selling ice or eyes. Uh, it turns out, spoilers, it's both. Vendor comes through, sells eyes to a bunch of people in this mountain town. There's like a woman named Lucia who is old and has very failing eyesight who buys some, and that leads to everyone else getting some, except for Ilsa, whose sweetheart has written her love poems about her eyes, and so she's attached to them. Come summer, they melt, because it was ice and eyes. It was both. Everyone in the village, everyone who's bought the eyes, which is everyone but Ilsa, their eyes melt. They have given up their eyes to get these new ones. Ilsa helps with the harvest as the only person who can still see. Does a lot of care work for people, and ultimately decides that she needs to go find that vendor because she would like to get her friends and family and village and locals and neighbors, etc., their eyes back. So she embarks on a journey that leads her to, to a farmhouse where she exchanges her clothes for a different set. Ultimately to a city where she finds out that the vendor is about to marry the queen. The queen grants them a brief stay of marriage because she's only willing to marry a man of leisure. And the vendor is allowed 1 year to teach Ilsa how to fix eyes. She goes through this rigorous year, ultimately does learn how to do it, is gifted a bunch of stone and crystal eyes by the vendor, and they is also propositioned by the vendor. It's like, you're the sharpest girl I ever met. I'd marry you over the queen. And she's like, well, I got a sweetheart back at home. And he's like, it's been a year. And she's like, he'll wait. And he's like, all right, idiot. Because he's kind of a jerk. And she wanders her way back home, finds the sweetheart married, replaces all of the eyes of the people in her village. When I say this is like fable-like, I think I love about Ila Yu's writing is that, like, she does the fable, but she doesn't do it with the, like, the frugality of a lot of fables that I think we would be more familiar with. Like in this one, right? There's an instance where, like I mentioned, right? She walks to go find the to find the eye vendor, right? Early on, she finds somebody and asks, and this person says, like, go to this next village, go to the end of the road, my daughter will be there, she knows more than I do, she'll let you know. This is the person she finds, who gives her advice, feeds her, and says, like, hey, give me your clothes, I have, like, more adequate clothes for you, because you have left the mountains, you are now in warmer climes. And then just come back whenever you're coming back through, and I'll give you your clothes back. And then the year happens for Ilsa, and on the way back, the she stops at the person's house. Same old cat is there. She knows it's the same place. She knocks on the door and says like, "Hey, about a year ago, I came through here. I left my old clothes. You gave me these new ones. I really appreciated it, and I just wanted to exchange them back." And the same woman is like, "I don't know you. Who are you? Like, what? You? No, I don't have any food. Go away." And she's like, "Well, I mean, okay, but like, I did take some of my mother's silver when I left. I had like 12 silver, and I really like to return that to my mother." And she's like, "No, I don't. It's been a year. I don't know who you are. I don't know what this is about. Please leave. There is no food in this house or in this village." Um, and that is not brought up again. There's no moment where the mother says, but where is the silver? There's no moment. I mean, there's a brief moment where it's like she's very cold when she's climbing back up this mountain to the town that she lives in, but she's warmed by the thought of her sweetheart. There's no consequences to this action, which, um, to me, is great. I really like it, actually. It's not the way I tend to think about story, folk tales or fables, right? Usually, the economy of fables is everything has a consequence, um, positive or negative. Every bit of knowledge that one gains about the world builds to the moral. That is not the case in some of Ililiu's stories, and I think it's really fantastic because I think that is. I think one could make the claim, and I might be making it right now. I don't know if I would defend it as much as I might want to at the moment when I think about it more. But like that is the remainder that's happening there, the bit of non instrumentalized storytelling in this fable is, I think, sort of the keystone of world building. Because when the farmer's daughter or whatever says, "There's no food here, there's no food in this village," we don't get to linger with that village because this is ultimately a fable. It is a story of a girl's leaving. It is a story of a town's folly, a girl leaving and learning and fixing it and finding herself in that process, right? We don't linger on that town, that like two-horse town or whatever. But we do learn that there has been some amount of deprivation that has happened over the last year. That the world has moved while the story was being told. And I like that a lot. The quote I wrote on Ilsa, who saw clearly, from Jewel Box. I thought I might go long here. It's from the end. Not the exact end, but very close to it. More often, though, she thought of the distant lands he had told her about, where he had learned his art. Jewel-colored jungles, thick with flowers and snakes, white sands. Ooh, I wrote these pretty bad. I think it's okay. Starting over. More often, though, she thought of the distant lands he had told her about, where he had learned his art. Jewel-colored jungles, thick with flowers and snakes, white sands waning into a green sea, dark pine forests alive with deer and wolves and red foxes. Sort of like I said, what was it in the second one? Yeah, the lamp, the turning, the thing about the elms and oaks were browning at their tips. There's a kind of writing about nature that I think Iliu is phenomenal at. And yeah, that's the moment when she has sort of restored the town and is starting to think about something else for herself. Next story is The Doing and Undoing of Jacob E. Monge. This is a good story. This is a good story. I might end up taking a break in the middle of this. That's weird. Um, this is a good story. The Doing and Undoing of Jacob E. Monge. Um, Jacob is a person who is not, who is a don't, who is not a doer. Lives in Kenya in the future, or a world in which there was something called the Howl that people don't like to talk about, and then there was something called the Consolation. Uh, that's not it. Nope, that's already too far. Ooh. The Compassion. So at some point in this world, there was the Howl. Everyone started killing each other effectively, I guess. It's really, really vaguely alluded to. Then there was the Compassion in about a 3-year span when sort of universal health care and universal basic income was sort of passed throughout the entire world. Jacob is in Kenya. He's a don't. There is a sort of a dividing line between doers and don'ts, right? Everyone has enough money to live. You have enough money to pay rent, have a couple drinks, eat food. You don't have to do shit. Jacob loves not doing shit, except for playing video games with his crew of other don'ts. The story itself sort of like interrogates that in interesting ways. Comes down in a spot where I'm like appreciative of the message, but not quite sure about it, or where I land on it at least. And is the first of these stories that I had a bit of a time finding a it's not that there aren't any beautiful sentences in this. It's that the story is more focused on the movement of the story than on the sentence, which is not usually the case. I find in Yu's work. I think she's extremely focused on both and is very good at both. But I like a sentence. This is why I have been reading sentences, and this is why I'm going to read this sentence because I think it's good. I don't think it lives up to the other ones I've read so far or the ones I'm about to read. Jacob launched the game and became a silver lion with a braided mane, 10 feet tall and scarred from battle. And I think that's like one of the things done well about this is like it does have a sense of video games that I don't think is a given. This isn't like the best description of video games I've ever read in fiction, but it is far from the worst, and it is well above competent, which I think is a thing worth admiring. Maybe if I ran across the story on its own, I would be like, oh, that's cool. But in the context of this really wonderful short story collection, like, yeah, fuck yeah, you could do a lot of things. You could talk about very specific kinds of stares, and you could talk about video games without sounding like a complete dweeb, which most people can't, including people who write about them, like me, sometimes. Okay, next story. The Wretched and the Beautiful. Ooh. Oh, yes. This is the one where aliens show up on Earth, I guess. Pretty clearly Earth. I don't know if it's ever said to be. But a bunch of people are vacationing. This is a story told in the not second person, the first person plural, and I'm a sucker for that. And I love what it does with that because it does the opposite thing that I usually love, which is I like the second or the first person plural as a vehicle for telling stories that fundamentally revolve around solidarity, right? You say we, you have an implicit understanding of a community at the very least, or not at the very least, a multiplicity. More often, a community that can be anything from three people, like in We Know the Devil, a story that a game that I wrote about for Strange Horizons a million years ago, and is still one of my favorite games of all time. Um, this is about a kind of ideology, I guess, a kind of solidarity, in the way that capitalists have class solidarity. Um, the story sort of begins with these people who are on vacation to this beach on what is and very clearly another piece of climate fiction, a despoiled planet. They have scrimped and saved, as the quote I will read in a second indicates, to be able to spend some time on this beach. Some aliens land. It's a whole to do. This is a very clear. This is a very clear refugee story, which is also what Ila Liu's first novel was about, very strongly on fragile waves. I don't remember if I read this and talked about it on this channel, or if I read it just before I started this. But that came out in the last couple of years. It was really good. I would like to revisit it at some point. Because I think when I read it, I was just so in love with my memory of her stories, that are all in here now, all in here, that I had a hard time sort of like divesting myself of that memory of like things like the cartographer wasps and the anarchist bees. That I ended up having sort of had a very positive time with it, but I think I could have had a better one, and I think I might, now that I've reread her stories, if I go back to it at some point. But yes, it is very clear that the aliens are refugees, both both sort of allegorically and literally in the text of the story. In that, like, one of the things that happens is like the UN convenes and decides that they're going to have to split up the aliens to every different country, and give privilege to member states and stuff like that to what was it? It's something along the lines of like make sure scientific development is evenly distributed among member states, or something like that. And the we voice grows increasingly vicious and reactionary as these decisions come down, and then ultimately in the story, these are of course the wretched of the title, the beautiful, show up, and it's other aliens who have access to the same universal translator, but much more regular access to it, and who are just like, so sorry to have taken up your precious time. We've been hunting these fucking terrorists forever, and we just want to take them and go home. We'll repatriate them. Don't even worry about what we're gonna do with them. They've been troublemakers for a while, and the we voice, the collective we, goes, oh, you're so beautiful. Thank you. You're so articulate. Thank you. We really want to extradite these aliens. Get rid of them. We have it so hard already. This is one of the stories that I think is the clearest on Yu's ability to sort of parrot the the reactionary voice in a way that I think is extremely clear that she is being extremely mocking. But yeah, I think it's among the more immediately political of the stories in this. So my quote from this was, "This was appalling news. We who had stitched, skimped, and uh, sorry, we who had stitched, skimped, and pinched. Is it pinched? Shit. Let's say it's pinched. Starting from the top. This was appalling news. We who had stitched, skimped, and pinched all year for one luxurious day on a clean beach would have our wallets rifled to feed and house the very creatures whose presence denied us a section of our beach and the vistas we had paid for." Um, Truly reprehensible. Truly reprehensible we in the story, which is a thing I have not really encountered a ton, and I really liked it. The next story is the Urashima effect, about a person who is traveling to a distant world on Starship. Very science fiction. This person has been sent on this trip and is sort of scheduled to be there in a certain number of years. They are traveling at like 9.997 C, or 99% of the speed of light, I guess 99.7% of the speed of light. And they were sort of put in cold storage, and then they're awoken when they're about 3 years out from the planet they have planned on being sort of the seed colonists for, or the seed explorers of. And the story is about they're getting sort of back into shape after cold storage. So they start exercising, and they have a handful of like recordings from loved ones, sort of to get them through the last few years of the cold vacuum of space. And the Urashima effect is related to the story that their partner has sent up with them. Describes a sort of creation myth. And it goes a little bad. Right, and the quote I have is the literal last sentence of this story. So I will continue. The sort of reveal that happens near the end of this is, again, a 10, 15 page story, max. The partner basically says, like, "So, I told you the story to let you know that you were actually put in cold storage about 2 years before you launched. And in those years, there has been sort of a brink. A couple of nations have gone to the brink of war, and the ship that I was intended to follow you in is no longer going to launch ever." This is a grounding thing for the sort of POV character, that they will be on this planet for a couple of years before their partner comes, maybe 10 years, right? The partner says basically, "I'm never gonna get to come. You have two choices. You can keep going, and I would love you for that. This is a dream that we both had that I hope you follow in some ways. You can make it there. It will be lonely, though. I will not come. There will be no follow-ups in any near future, but you will be on a new planet, and you will be able to do the work that we had hoped to do." or I have programmed, or I have made it's made sure that there is a way for you to come back. If you come back between the time dilation that happens when traveling near the speed of light and the simple process of time as normal, if you come back, I will be very old, and you will still be roughly the same age, plus a couple of years, as you were when you left. And I'll be waiting. This is a very sad story. It's a very sad story in a very different way from, the famous, like the cold equations, the early science fiction that prides itself on the scientific fiction, that prides itself on taking seriously the physics before the characters of the story, right? Um, it's just it takes that mode of writing and extrapolates it into people in a way that's been done very well very many times at this point, but I think is also done very well here. Um, and I guess I want to just read the last line of the story because this is one of the things that I think Yu is very good at across these stories, is having very good first lines and very good last lines. I haven't read any of them. I will be doing that more. Uh, the last line of the Urashima effect is Leo began another game of chess with a computer and drew black. Which is, they've made their decision. They will keep playing chess and listening to their recordings and getting back into physical shape and do the thing they went to do and not return to the person that they love. It's kind of a little devastating. Next story, Braid of Days and Wake of Nights. Julia and Vivian are dear friends. There's a horse missing in Central Park. Is that horse a unicorn? Probably. Vivian's got terminal cancer. Julia can't deal with that. Needs to get a unicorn. Julia does get a unicorn. Vivian has reconnected with her ex-husband. Question mark? I don't remember if it was a husband or boyfriend. Vivian sees the unicorn when Julia brings it. Julia has been braiding Vivian's hair that has fallen out, of course, because of chemo, into a sort of reins situation. A very affecting little story. The sentence I want to read is another example of Ililiu's ability to just insert a poetic sentiment into a story and just like write good words. It's just writing good words. Loneliness gusted through Julia, sudden as rain. That's it. Local stop on the floating train is the next story, and that is probably the shortest one of the bunch, from what I remember. It's about a young woman who is recommended a play by a friend and has to get on the floating train to go see it. She gets off work early, sits on a train that is driving through the nuclear wastes, and is seated alone until a man and his son walk up. The son sits next to her, and the man stares daggers through her, stares icy needles through her, actually, I think is the phrasing, for a long time, until she basically says, like, why are you staring at me? And he says, You should have given me your seat. That would have been the polite thing to do. And she said, there's plenty of empty seats. And he says, you know, maybe you should get a fucking boyfriend. Maybe you wouldn't be such a bitch if you'd gotten laid. But I bet you couldn't even keep a boyfriend. And then he storms off. The kid apologizes. He comes back with the conductor, having lodged a complaint that she's harassing him and his son. No one on the train defends her, despite having heard the whole previous thing. The conductor says she has to get off the next stop. She says there's no stops until the city because we're in a nuclear wasteland. And the conductor says no, there's a local stop, and kicks her off the train. And then she walks into the night. This is one. Now I'm going to read the first sentence because, like I said, she's got very good first sentences too. So it's the first sentence of a local stop on the floating train. Under a citrus slice of moon, the white... Oop. This got in my way. Under a citrus slice of moon, the white train wound silently through the night. Good alliteration, good imagery. Come on. Good setting. Like, good use of the title as a piece of knowledge one already has, which is the thing I think a lot of things don't do very well. Because it's the local stop on the floating train. Again, that's the title. The white train wound silently. No floating in there. That's good prose. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more stories to go. We can do this. We got this. We got this. Bees. 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 We got this. The Witch of Orion Waste and the Boy Knight. This is a longer one. This one's got dragons in it, even. It's about a hut where some fragments from the Orion cluster have crashed that have had witches living in them on and off for ages. A woman who works at a local store, I guess. I don't remember the exact details. Becomes sort of like brought into the witching life, told to be very careful of who she lets through the doors, and given, among other things, a little bell that sort of sees the truth of people and their and has an ability to like see who's telling lies, basically. She meets a knight who just sort of asks for a sort of blessing because he needs to kill some dragons, but he's real scared of the dragons, and she's real fond of him. And he says, like, he can't pay her, and she said, well, if you'll just pay me in kisses, then I'd be happy to travel with you. And they kiss, and it's very sweet. They travel through the dragon realm, and he sort of cowers every time a dragon shows up. The first one, he says he simply can't do it. She wanders off in the night and slays the dragon. The second one, he says he can't do it. She wanders into the night and slays the dragon. The third one, he says, well, you've functionally emasculated me. I'm going to go die now at this dragon's hands. But I will try. And he goes and he gets caught. And right as he's about to be devoured, she slays the dragon for him. And then there's a princess in the tower the dragon was on. And the princess is saved. And he recriminates the witch, accusing her of attempting to kill him when he was being crushed to death by the dragon by yelling. And she can't respond because she has fried her vocal cords by way of magic. She eventually remembers the bell when he sort of falls out of love with her, um, and into love with this princess who must have her hands tied behind her back because anything she touches will be hers. She remembers the bell. She looks at it, and she gets this description of the knight. As the title says, the boy knight. Around his limbs wound a silver spell, older than the witch and wrought with greater art than hers. And when the witch strummed the strands of it with a nail, she heard in their hum that they would break and let him grow only when he had slain 3 dragons by his own hands. And she weeps for him, and she sees a hole, a devouring hole in the center of this princess. This is all after that she has overheard them talking about killing her because the knight claims that she ensorcelled him, when in fact he had been ensorcelled much before. And she realizes that the only thing keeping her on this journey is herself, and she leaves. And she weeps for them both because of their own ailments. And the thing I almost pulled is this really, really fantastic description of what happens when the boy knight, the knight who the bell reveals is a sad, scared child, a sad, scared, abused child on the inside. That is a spell. The allowed growth can't happen until he slays 3 dragons. He's literally a boy. They hug at one point, the knight and the princess, and he shrinks into the size of a chess piece, and she puts him on his belt and feels frustrated and continues on because hers is a hunger that is impossible to sate. And the witch goes back to work at the shop, and then finds that she has some more things to do, and the story ends. Damn, is we going to the second one? Okay. Did I skip one? Damn, is that only... Damn, okay. So, the next story is The Eve of the Planet of Ys, YS. And I think this is our second story that is original to this collection. I'm talking a lot. This is a pretty beautiful one. I really liked this. This is extremely ill used short story writing to me, and I'm getting jazzed up about it. That's wild. Yeah. I guess so. From what I was able to determine, there's 4 stories in this that are original to the collection, or at least are not listed on the copyright page of the advanced reader copy that I have, because one of them, the next one, actually is a thing I swear I have read before. But anyway, from what I looked at in the arc that I have, there are 4 stories total that have not appeared anywhere else. This is the second. The first one was the Lion God and the what was it called? The Lion God and the 2 Gates. Right, I want to say the Lion God and the Judge or something like that, but it's the 2 Gates. And then the next story is going to be the next one. Even the Planet of Ys is about a planet with 2 suns, and the suns are dying. And the depredations that causes. The rich people there have like 3 different plans about sending out a starship to finding a new home, about cryogenically freezing themselves, and there's another one that I don't remember. But the focus is on this one woman who sort of finds seeds and has a little bit of planting to do, to eat, and that is obviously hard when you have 2 dying suns, neither of which provides the kind of vitamins that plants need to live. One girl comes to her very broken. She nurses her, feeds her. Another girl comes and she says, I will feed you as well as I, but I think we're all fucked. The 3 of them eventually find, through ingenuity, engineering, and social graces. A sort of vault, basically, that is buried under a neighbor's yard, who they get together with, and some other neighbors all get together. They all find this space where they can basically find enough food to live for a little. But in the meanwhile, there is the production of what is the term for when you grow weed inside? Ooh, it's escaping me. Kind of lamps, kind of lamps. They have a production where they can shit. It's frustrating. It's not just for weed. That's just the way I know it personally. California. But they find this place and live there for a number of years. One of the people who is in this sort of compound is an artist who makes a giant mural, and it's very beautifully described. This is another like top tier one of these stories, honestly. Now that I'm sort of going through it, and ultimately the woman who sort of the first person we met in the story realizes that it's her time. That the sun has exploded, one of them at least, and that the surface is certainly a sort of a place with just enough atmosphere that you wouldn't die immediately. Let's say that you would just freeze to death very quickly, and she leaves and sees the sky again and dies. The quote I have from this is another instance, I think, of just the simple beauty of Yu's writing in the ways that it can take any situation, strip it to its bare minimum, and render it poetry. This is after the starship has left. The rich people starship has rocketed into the sky way before the sun has exploded, before they've even found the underground storage. If rifles of light were turned on the mob, the killing was too quiet to hear. It's horrifying. But very, very beautifully written. It's gonna be the longest video I ever made. Next story is Courtship Displays of the American Birder. Another, as far as I can tell, original to this, even though I swear to God I've read the story before. It's about a birder who goes on a little combine harvester. He's like kind of new to the whole thing. He's only got like 400 originals or whatever. Meets a woman who almost falls into the combine harvester. He saves her. They get coffee. She invites him out to Cape May. He declines. But he does redouble his love of birding and eventually quits his substitute job. Flies out on a whim to Cape May and they rekindle something. Very cute. Another love story. The quote I read is just a very cute thing. All the gray birders were waving at him, windmilling their arms, but only one of them was bouncing on her toes, her bucket green galoshes swishing and squeaking, her face alight with recognition. Victor is out in her area, and they're all yelling, "Victor, Victor!" as he walks over to a lighthouse. Because she has started shouting, and the other birders have picked it up because they're fucking birders. I don't know. Just a very cute story. Okay. The No One Girl and the Flower of the Farther Shore. The No One Girl is a girl who's only relation, friend, anything is her grandmother. Her grandmother dies. She continues living in the house. She's young. She doesn't speak to anybody. Neighbors throw stones at her. She eats literally what she catches, and the only time she talks is when she goes to her grandmother's grave to tell her grandmother about the changing of the seasons and so on and so forth. One day at her grandmother's grave, she finds a flower of the farther shore, a flower that only blooms in death, and cherishes it, takes it home, feeds it her blood, cares for it, speaks to it, tends to it even when there's not even a shoot. In the village that she's in, there is an annual contest in which they award the most sort of creative invention or thing brought. And the reward is it's like a gold brooch and a silver something or other. They're like a willow leaf and something else. And she desperately wants to win this. And she thinks she will bring this flower of the farther shore to the competition and win it and be able to sell it to feed herself and to live. The baker's son overhears her talking about this and steals the flower. And then the world responds to her only unspoken wish, which was to disappear. And this is the quote from that section. What had been the no-one girl mixed with volcanic ash and ant eggs and ancient bones, leaf mold and roots both thick as a man's waist and fine as hair. She disappears into the earth. She becomes one with the earth. This is after the baker's son has presented the flower from the farther shore, painted and perfumed, to the judges, who absolutely don't let it win because it smells like cheap perfume and it looks like a boring flower. And this is like the final indignation that the no-one girl suffers before the world acknowledges her wish to simply become one with it. And then the story keeps going. It's really lovely. She becomes the earth, and she flowers of the farther shore. And as much as she was almost immediately forgotten and her house taken over by the baker's son, she blankets the area with flowers, and the name of the town is forgotten, and it becomes a town of the farther shore. And I think it's really lovely. We are now about to get into the two stories in this collection that I didn't really fuck with. The Time Invariance of Snow seems like it should be extremely up my alley. It literally begins with once, footnote 1. The devil made a mirror, footnote 2. Footnote 1 is once is something like an exact concept once you think about the fullness of time. Footnote 2 is the mirror is a bit of poetic license, since this is a thing that exists in 7 dimensions. This is the kind of story that I eat up. I don't think it's extremely well done, and that's a bummer. My quote. Okay, I should set this up a little bit more. So this is framed sort of as, the first part is like almost like an academic paper. It then leads into these sort of like little vignettes about these characters G and K. G is in love with K. He tells a story about how he would murder her if he was going to murder her. She says, "What the fuck? That like made me upset." He says, "Oh well, wow. I guess I'm the bad guy now. And it storms off, and she says something along the lines of like, "I know how this is gonna go. I'm just to follow you, and we're gonna end up in the fucking the palace of the Snow Queen or whatever. You're going to be messing around with a mirror of reason. I'm going to try to rescue you, but you're not going to have been taken. I'm just going to be heartbroken. I've done this before. I'm done. No. Uh, and then there's a bunch of stories about G sort of wandering the world, growing older, meeting the lap women who knit and play and skin you at poker, uh, meeting the devil, ending up in the Palace of the Snow Queen, seeing, of course, the Snow Queen instantiates itself as she picks up the crown, instead smashing the crown of the throne. And then ultimately G and K meet each other when they're very old. And K, the I'm the bad guy now guy, says this, which I thought was fantastic. You saw me plainly. I couldn't bear it. I wanted to hurt you, and I did. That is an apology. It's good stuff. Yeah, but the story itself. And then there's 3 variations on a theme of imperial desire, which is another one. Again, I love me some metatext. I love me some deconstructions of things done actively. I am actively thinking about and possibly having conversations about rereading House of Leaves in a book club style. I fuck with that. I think David Foster Wallace sucked as a human being, but I did read Infinite Jest and I did love the shit out of that book. 3 variations on the theme of imperial desire is a sort of self-conscious retelling of The Emperor's New Clothes. It opens with a bit of a pithy narrator moment, but it's like, oh no, but we'll get to the story, and then we tell the story. And then it's like, well, okay, so like things wouldn't happen like that right now, so what if we like reframed it and made it like The Emperor's New Clothes or the Patriot Act kind of a deal. And it's like, oh well, and then we get this quote. So, a character study is what's needed, it seems. And it drills down on how stories are told and reframed, and it's good. It's a good story. I just don't. It doesn't do much for me. We now have the final original story to this collection. We got like 3 more after that. The Cat's Tale. Again, original as far as I can tell. Which means I am reading from an advanced reader copy. I don't know that the list of copyright information is exact. I only checked it a couple times. I could have missed something. I missed that the courtship displays of the American Birder was between the Eve of the Planet East and the No One Girl and the Flower of the Farther Shore. You can see that on my notes right here, right? Courtship displays, all in caps right there, because I just straight up missed it, and then I had to turn the page because that's where the quote is, and I wrote between East and the Farther Shore. It's not a research thing. I'm just doing my shit. Okay. The Cat's Tale is a story of a young girl who's taking a cow to sell, runs across a cat who's selling stuff on the road. The cat's like, you're gonna get beans, you're gonna do a Jack of the Beanstalk thing, don't do it. And the girl's like, I just need some money for rent. And the cat's like, you seem like you're pretty quick. Here's a bag of silver. That's pay for a week. Take it home. I'll see you tomorrow. The 2 of them go on an adventure to an ogre's fiefdom. They wander through. They see this abundant land with vineyards and wheat rows and people on the verge of starvation. And they keep asking, whose land is this? Whose inn is this? Whose establishment is this? And they all say, Lord Walter. And eventually they get to the sort of like last stop before, and this big tavern, and the main character talks to the people there and says, hey, the land has what you want. Lord Walter wouldn't be able to run it without your labor. why not strike? And they say, Lord Walter has many soldiers. They will kill us. They will kill our children. She says, I have a plan. There's a fairy hill nearby. I have a flute. I can open it up. We can hide the children and the elderly. And you don't need to explicitly withhold your labor. There is muck and swamp nearby. All you need to do is convincingly act as though you have the plague, and look the part and smell the part. The soldiers will flee. They do this. It works. The cat and the woman go into the king's lair and wait and watch the fish for a while, the carp, while all the soldiers and the servants steal as much as they can and flee from the assumed incoming plague-ridden villagers. They confront the king for the murder of his 2 children, and in the name of the lady of the house. Walter cuts the cat's head off. And then she turns into a lady, the lady, and he turns into a rat and gets Pied Pipered into the moat and drowns with all the other rats. And then the woman and the cat, the former cat, have a little conversation. And the woman asks, why did you get a lady? Why'd you get to be lady when your head got cut off as a cat? And the response is, it is an old precept of magic, decreed by Madame d'Autnoy herself, that a woman transformed into a cat must have her head severed to return to her form. And I love this because I've said this repeatedly, right? Jewel box use writing in general is much more on the fable end of things, which is just to say, it is not the kind of thing that describes the system of magic. And this is not that. This is not, Lev Grossman's The Magicians, where, everything has to be very, it's not even, fucking Tolkien, where everything has to, derive out of a certain linguistic style or something like that. It is simply this is also, I guess, what I was saying about, God, it's been an hour. Since I was talking about this, right? I think I was talking about this with the Ilsa Who Saw Clearly section, where you get that little remainder that is to me world building, and I think that's another extremely good example of that, right? This is just a sentence tossed off. It's a beautifully written sentence. It doesn't have anything to do with a systematized understanding of the world. It doesn't have anything to do with the frugality of economy of fable writing. It's just hey, there's a Madame d'Autnoy. She wrote the Precepts of Magic. She said, you get turned into a cat, you gotta have your head cut off to be a woman again. And it just moved on. And it's great. It's great. Next up, we got The Valley of Wounded Deer. This is about a prince who was born, whose mother died in childbirth, who was hidden for 10 years in the walls of a castle, who gets announced and who is going to assume the throne on her 16th birthday. But definitely won't, because the queen has murdered all other relatives and then pardoned them after the fact to make sure that she is the queen for as long as she's alive, right? It is made explicitly clear that the cook has been instructed to poison the prince on her 16th birthday with a halva that she loves. She goes out into the woods a couple days before her birthday, finds the Valley of the Wounded Deer, Before that, she finds an old man who is fishing in the sky for the revenge carp, whose scales shine red. I believe is how it's phrased. Whose scales shine red. There might be another word in there. And he tells her, her being the prince, to go to this Valley of the Wounded Deer, and gives her a pill to take that will allow her to speak with animals for an hour. She goes to this valley, meets 3 deer who tell her that the way of wolves is better than the way of man, the way of ravens is better than the way of man, and that the way of God is better than the way of ravens, wolves, and man. She returns. She sits at the feast, eats nothing until the halva is procured, eats the halva, and goes to prepare for death. The next morning, she wakes up. All of the revelers and the queen herself are dead. The cook comes up and says, I couldn't do it. What I did was poisoned everything, and then put the antidote in the halva. But it was just me. If anyone is to die, kill me. The other cooks, the line cooks, show up and say, "Fuck that, we helped." And the prince says, "How want to rule shit? You could be queen." And then bequeaths the kingdom on to the cook, and bails and wanders around and helps out some people and does what she can and then dies. I'm reading from the 3rd deer who talks here. The first 2 were deer who'd been hunted but not killed. And this is in the titular Valley of Wounded Deer. The 3rd one has a different ailment. The 3rd one was in a different king's sort of forests, I guess, and is sort of pinned to the ground because they have a gold statue, basically, on their head. This is the deer who says that the ways of God are better than the ways of man, raven, and wolf. Quote, in every mouthful of green, in every drink of cool water, in the velvet of our antlers and in our deaths, is the name of God inscribed. I think that's beautiful. My throat's fucking giving out. 2 more. 2 very good ones also, which is nice. The view from the top of the stair is just delightful. Woman works like a menial job. Hates it, but she loves stairs so much. And all she wants is stairs. And then her dad dies, and she gets an inheritance. It's like 6 figures, and she's like, I can do stairs. I can make stairs. So she quits her job, moves out into a barn in the middle of nowhere, and contracts a bunch of contractors to fix the barn up and then to make stairs. And she has 12 staircases. And then eventually she becomes a sort of tourist attraction, and she wanted to make one more set of stairs, but instead she has to pay for a giant fence and like a beware of dog sign and like stop or I'll shoot signs and shit like that. So she can't get the last staircase she wants. But in the middle of it, she had her one friend come out who doesn't really care about staircases but loves doors, and so sort of gets her in that way. And they have a little conversation, and it's very cute. And she's like, okay, well, it's not the dream that I dreamt completely, but it is very good for me. I have all the staircases I need. I'm happy with them. Oh, also she like barred up the barn door at a certain point when everyone was like coming to like visit / gawk, and like had another set of glass stairs set in, so the only way into her house looks like you have to walk up and just into the air and to the back of the house. Very cool moments. A lot of really good descriptions of stairs, which is the thing I'm about to read. But eventually somebody comes in and says, I would like to build you a staircase. And she says, I spent all my money. And he says, The only payment I require is that you climb it. She says, okay, what is it? What are the specs? And he describes them. And she says, that sounds pretty good. I don't really have space for it. And he says, it'll be on your roof, and it will go to the stars and maybe beyond. And she says, oh, fuck yeah, dude. I love this idea. And then he disappears for 2 weeks, and she's like, well, that was a good idea. It was a fun dream to have. And then he comes back and he does it. And she says, will I ever see you again? And he says, no. And then she starts climbing. And she climbs. Well, by the end of the story, she's convinced she's going to pass the moon soon. But the thing I'm going to read is from way earlier. This is just fun. This is a fun story. And it's very pretty. Quote, across the barn, the southern wall had the reed hourglass stair. A ribbon of steel painted... Across the barn, the southern wall had the reed hourglass stair, semicolon. A ribbon of steel painted yellow and blue that looped upon itself, alternating colors, semicolon. And, last in line, a series of 4 bronze trees whose limbs bent into treads. Listen, I don't think about stairs very often, but you describe some pretty stairs to me. I'm not going to be mad about it. Last story. What's that say? Okay. Small monsters. Is. Story about a small monster who's born, whose parent hunts for it and brings it food, but when it can't find food, it eats the small monster's limbs, and those regrow. And at one point, it whelps another monster, an even smaller monster, and the small monster starts to hide, starts to take less of the pain. Eventually, the small monster starts to play, starts to venture out of the cave it has lived its whole life in, despite its parents' disavowal of that, lack of. Don't gotta go beat by beat. A small monster travels through a monstrous world where it is constantly eaten in pieces so as to preserve it. Across a series of different kinds of monster, eventually gains its freedom and finds on the beach what is like a clawed creature, a little, pretty clearly a hermit crab, but like in a monster world. A hermit crab obsessed with art who just wants to cover the small monster in sea glass and coins and so on and so forth. The small monster goes through a number of trials, specifically around encountering the monsters who it was birthed to, was sibling of, and was taken by, fights them, and with the help of the art/armor of the clawed creature, eventually survives. And then the clawed creature goes, what do you want to make? And this is the answer. At last, the once small monster said, an island, with moss, trees, and small scuttling things, with crevices and caves for the scuttling things. Then you shall create an island, the clawed creature said. And that's Jewel Box by Ela Liu, a fantastic book. And that's 2023 and No Buzz. Thank you for not watching.